The city of Lisboa never slept. As the sun dipped below the Atlantic horizon, the yellow trams rattled along cobbled streets and fado songs seeped from dimly lit taverns. But not every soul found comfort in the rhythm of the city. Seated on a cold bench in Ratio Square, a young woman stared blankly at the glowing windows of cafes she could no longer afford to enter. Her name was Mariana Alves. Just 22, yet her eyes looked decades older. She wrapped her threadbare coat tighter around her shoulders and tried to remember the last warm meal she had. Her stomach growled in protest. Another evening alone. Another night on the streets. Just 2 months ago, Mariana had a bed, books, a part-time job in a pastelaria near Alfama, and even dreams of studying social anthropology. But now she was invisible. Passers-by avoided her gaze, as if poverty were contagious. Mariana was not born into wealth, but her family had a comfortable life in the suburbs of Amadora. Her father, Domingos, worked as a bank clerk. Her mother, Helena, ran a boutique. From the outside, they looked like a family from a television advert. But inside their neatly painted home, cold silence had replaced conversation, and expectations suffocated affection. Mariana had never truly fit in. She questioned things her parents called traditions. She refused to follow the path they laid out for her: marriage to a wealthy family friend's son, and working in the boutique as her mother's assistant. Her dreams of university were dismissed as childish. Her curiosity was labeled defiance. The last straw came on a rainy Thursday. Mariana had been volunteering at a local shelter in Barro Alto, helping serve soup to unhoused men and women. Her mother found out through a neighbor. "You serve beggars now," Helena hissed, her voice sharp like shattered glass. "Do you think this makes you noble? You shame this family." That night, Mariana packed a bag and left. She believed her parents would come looking for her, call her, ask if she was safe. But no message came. No knock on the door of her rented room in Muraria. 2 weeks later, when she lost her job due to budget cuts, rent slipped out of reach. The landlady changed the locks. Now, the city she once loved had become a labyrinth of stone and indifference. She wandered from Chiado to Cais do Soter, sleeping where she could, avoiding the shadows that moved too quickly. What hurt most was not hunger, nor the cold. It was knowing her family knew, and still did nothing. That night, as rain began to fall softly onto the square, Mariana pulled her coat over her head and curled into herself. Across the street, a busker played an old guitar under a cafe awning. The song was sad and strangely familiar. Mariana closed her eyes. She did not yet know this was only the beginning. She did not yet know who would appear next. She did not yet know how far the silence would echo. Morning arrived in Lisboa not with warmth, but with a sharp breeze blowing in from the Tagus River. The city shimmered under a silver sky, and the tiled pavements glistened with the memory of last night's rain. Mariana sat up slowly on the bench, her limbs stiff, her hair damp and tangled. The ache in her back had become familiar now, like an old friend she never invited. She blinked, adjusting to the light. Around her, the city resumed its routine. Office workers marched past, lattes in hand, eyes glued to their phones. Street cleaners swept away broken bottles and cigarette butts, restoring order before the next night's chaos. No one noticed her. No one ever did. Except one. He appeared near the fountain at Procalwis de Camoens. Middle-aged, perhaps in his late 40s, with gray-flecked curls and skin browned by the sun. He wore a long, woolen coat, far too elegant for someone who sat on the pavement with a blanket beside him. But what stood out was the scarf, bright blue, almost glowing against the drab morning. He wrapped it around his neck in a neat knot, and then looked up, straight at Mariana. She turned her head quickly, pretending not to notice. But he rose, slowly, and walked toward her with a gentle gait, his steps careful, deliberate. "Good morning," he said, in a deep and smooth voice. Mariana said nothing. Her heart thudded. She didn't trust strangers, especially men. She looked down at her shoes, worn and damp. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said. "Name's Joaquim. Been sleeping 3 benches over. Thought I'd say hello. It's rare to see someone new in this part of the square. Still, she said nothing. Joachim sat down, leaving a generous space between them. He pulled something from his coat pocket, a small paper bag. The smell of warm pounded dates filled the air. You hungry? He asked. That broke her. She nodded. He handed it over without ceremony. She took it cautiously. It was still warm. She bit into it and nearly wept. I've been here 5 years, Joachim said, watching the pigeons with lazy eyes. Used to teach music. Classical guitar. Ever heard of the Conservatorio Nacional? Mariana nodded slowly. Her uncle once played there, though she had not seen him in years. Got tired of the system, Joachim continued. Too many rules, too few souls. One day I walked out. Never went back. Family pretends I never existed. Wife changed the locks. Son moved to Porto. He said all this with no bitterness, only a strange kind of peace. You? Mariana looked at him, chewing the last bite of the sweet bread. My mother hates who I am, she said quietly. I wasn't obedient. I left. Thought it would be temporary. Joachim nodded as if he had heard the story 100 times before. That kind of hurt cuts deep, he said. Deeper than hunger. She was silent. Joachim stood. There's a woman named Sophia, who comes by the church steps at Say Cathedral. She gives out blankets and doesn't ask questions. You might like her. Mariana hesitated. Was this a trap? A lie? He saw the doubt in her eyes. You don't have to trust me. Just follow the bells. She's always there when they ring at noon. Then, with a soft smile, Joachim walked away, blue scarf trailing behind him like a whisper. Mariana sat still, the taste of bread still on her tongue, the city swirling around her. She did not know whether to follow his advice or stay hidden in the shadows she had grown used to. But she had seen something different in his eyes. Not pity. Recognition. Lisboa's sun reached higher by midday, though the wind off the Tagus kept the air sharp. The ancient trams screeched along the tracks, tourists fumbled with paper maps, and the smell of grilled sardines drifted down narrow alleyways. Yet for Mariana, the city felt like a maze made of echoes. She stood at the edge of the Alfama district, her hands shoved into her pockets, her gaze locked on the spire of Say Cathedral in the distance. It had taken her hours to gather the courage. Joachim's words still echoed in her mind, strange and persistent. Part of her thought he might not have been real, but the hunger gnawed at her belly, and the cold had seeped into her bones. If there truly was someone called Sophia who offered blankets and silence, Mariana had to see for herself. She climbed the winding path up through Alfama, past pastel houses and lines of drying laundry flapping like prayer flags. The cobbled streets were uneven, and her legs trembled with each step. She paused at the corner where a group of elderly men played dominoes beneath a tree. One of them glanced up, nodded, then went back to his tiles. No one questioned her. The cathedral came into view slowly, massive and gray, its twin towers reaching into the pale sky. Bells hung silently above, waiting for their moment. Tourists hovered at the entrance, snapping photos, murmuring about its history. But Mariana kept to the shadows, circling around to the side steps where Joachim had said Sophia would be. And then she heard them. The bells rang. Not a tinny chime, but a full, resonant call that rolled across the city like thunder in slow motion. Mariana stopped mid-step, the sound vibrating in her chest. People paused around her, some crossing themselves, others lifting their phones. But she only listened. There was something solemn in the sound, something that reached deep into her ribs and held her still. When the final bell faded, she spotted movement. A woman emerged from behind a pillar. She was in her late 50s, with short silver hair and a simple long coat. Her hands were full, a bag of folded blankets, a flask, some paper cups. She walked with purpose but not haste, as though she had done this 1,000 times and never lost faith in why. Sophia. Mariana didn't move. Her body wanted to run, but her hunger and exhaustion had settled into defiance. Sophia spotted her instantly. You knew? She asked gently, not approaching too quickly. Mariana gave a single nod. Sophia smiled.
Come.
Sit a moment. No expectations. They sat on the steps together. Sophia poured a cup of tea and handed it over without a word. It was hot, fragrant, with a hint of mint. Mariana cradled it like it was life itself. Blanket? Sophia asked. Another nod. Sophia draped a thick gray one over her shoulders, then resumed her position beside her. Neither spoke for a while. The city carried on below them, its noise softened by the stone walls. Eventually, Sophia said, I used to be someone else too. Mariana looked at her, curious but wary. I had a house in Estrella, a husband who wore suits and only cared about appearances. When my daughter told him she loved a woman, he threw her out. I left him that night. Never looked back. She sipped her tea, unfazed by the confession. I started coming here after I lost everything. I thought I was helping others. Turned out they were helping me. Mariana's throat tightened. She looked down at the cup in her hand, then whispered, My mother told me I was broken, that I'd end up like trash on the street. Sophia's gaze didn't flinch. You are not trash. You are surviving. There is a difference. For the first time in weeks, Mariana felt the sting of tears. She quickly wiped them away, embarrassed. Sophia stood. Come back tomorrow if you like. I'll have soup then.
Mariana hesitated,
Then nodded. And for the first time since sleeping on that bench, she didn't feel invisible. She was seen. Mariana returned to the cathedral steps the next day, just as the light began to shift from gold to silver. The wind was stronger that afternoon, whipping through the alleys of Alfama like a restless ghost. She clutched the gray blanket around her shoulders and walked with careful steps. She did not know if Sophia would really be there again, but something deep inside her hoped so. As she reached the top of the steps, her heart skipped. Sophia was there, exactly where she had been the day before, unpacking a pot of steaming soup from a cloth bag. Next to her stood a man with a scruffy beard, wearing a thick scarf and holding a battered guitar case. He looked up at Mariana and nodded with kind eyes. There you are, Sophia greeted softly. I was hoping you'd come. Mariana gave a half-smile and sat beside them, her back against the cold stone wall. The scent of soup reached her first, chickpeas, garlic, a hint of smoked paprika. Sophia handed her a bowl, without asking anything. This is Rue, Sophia said, gesturing to the man. He plays better when he has an audience. Rue gave a modest shrug. And soup. Soup helps too. Mariana let out a small laugh, surprising even herself. She had forgotten what her own laughter sounded like. Rue sat on the opposite side of the steps, tuning the strings of his guitar. Then gently he began to play. It was not the type of music one would hear in restaurants or cafes.
There was no showiness to it.
Just raw, honest chords that drifted into the evening air like a lullaby meant for the weary. The music wrapped itself around Mariana's chest and pulled at something she had locked away long ago. Sophia leaned closer. He comes every Thursday. Plays for those who don't have coins to spare, but still deserve music. Mariana sipped her soup slowly. She watched Rue's fingers glide over the strings with familiarity, each note landing like a soft footstep on cobblestones. A few other figures had gathered nearby, some older, others younger, all with that same quiet weight in their eyes. One woman wore mismatched shoes. Another clutched a stuffed animal too tightly for her age. But no one judged. They just listened. When Rue stopped, a silence fell. Not heavy, but thoughtful. Then someone clapped. Another followed. And soon, laughter joined the night. Mariana felt the corners of her mouth rise again. Do you want to play something? Rue asked, his voice light. Mariana shook her head quickly. I don't know how. Rue looked at her, not with pity, but possibility. Neither did I once. Sophia added, We all learn something new, eventually, even if it's just how to breathe again. The words settled in her bones. Mariana stayed until the street lamps flickered on and the sky turned indigo. When Sophia began to pack her things, Mariana stood, unsure whether to leave or help. Rui noticed and handed her a small folded tarp. "Would you carry this?" She nodded. Together, they cleaned the spot. Sophia thanked each person who came, not like a leader, but like a friend. Before they parted ways, Sophia placed a hand on Mariana's shoulder. "Tomorrow we go to the river. Bring your blanket." And just like that, Mariana was invited again, not as a charity case, not as a problem to be fixed, but as part of something. As she walked back down through the streets of Alfama, the city didn't seem quite so cold. The wind still blew, and the stones beneath her feet were still uneven. But she had soup in her belly, music in her memory, and a promise waiting in the morning. The Tagus River glittered beneath the morning sun like a silk ribbon unwinding across the city. Its gentle waves lapped against the stone quay, sending echoes up through the misty air. Mariana stood at the edge of the water, her blanket wrapped tight around her, watching Sophia and Rui set up a small gathering spot beneath the shadow of a leaning plane tree. She had arrived early, earlier than she had intended. Sleep had come to her in short, jagged stretches, and the city's distant hum had drawn her from her corner of the shelter before the bells even rang. But she had not wanted to miss whatever this was. A group of familiar faces soon appeared: the woman with mismatched shoes, the older man with trembling hands, a teenager with a hood drawn low over his eyes. No one looked surprised to see each other. It was as though they had all agreed, silently, to belong here today. Sophia spread out a weathered cloth and placed a basket on top. Rui brought out 2 chipped thermoses and began pouring small cups of coffee. There was no ceremony, no speech, just quiet preparation like it had always been done this way. Mariana sat on the cloth and folded her legs under her. The river's breeze tugged at her fringe, and the smell of salt mixed with warm bread from a nearby stall. It was so simple, yet it reached deep into her chest, this unspoken kindness. "Do you want to help hand these out?" Sophia asked, passing her a small stack of bread rolls wrapped in brown paper. Mariana hesitated, then nodded. As she moved from person to person, she noticed something curious. No one just took the bread. They met her eyes. They smiled. They said thank you like it mattered. And it did matter. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, she felt she was not invisible. By the time the rolls were gone, the space beneath the tree had become a small oasis. Someone pulled out a harmonica and played an uneven tune that somehow felt perfect. A child, no more than 5, chased after pigeons with squeals of joy. Rui leaned back against the tree trunk and hummed along, his guitar case unopened at his feet. Mariana sat again beside Sophia. "You do this every week?" she asked. Sophia nodded. "Sometimes more. Whenever we can."
Why?
Sophia looked at her for a moment, her expression unreadable, then said simply, "Because someone once did it for me." The sentence hung in the air, delicate as a strand of spider silk. Mariana did not ask more. She did not need to. She understood. She turned her gaze back to the water. Boats drifted past lazily, their sails white against the blue sky. A gull swooped low and cried out once before vanishing over the rooftops. Everything felt both peaceful and incredibly alive. As the gathering slowly dissolved, Rui finally opened his guitar case and began to strum something slow and old. Mariana did not know the tune, but it settled inside her like a memory she never had. When the sun reached its peak, Sophia stood and brushed crumbs from her skirt. "Come with us," she said. "We're visiting someone today. He grows tomatoes in his backyard and always makes too much stew." Mariana blinked. "Do I know him?" Sophia smiled. Not yet. There was no pressure in the invitation. Just warmth. A door left ajar. Mariana looked down at her blanket. Then, without a word, she rose and followed. They left the river behind, weaving through Lisbon's labyrinth of tiled walls and steep steps, with the wind at their backs and the distant sound of guitars still trailing behind them like a blessing. The tram rattled along the narrow rails, winding through Alfama like a golden thread pulled across fabric. As the 3 of them stepped off at a quiet stop near the top of a hill, the city below stretched out in terracotta waves. Narrow alleyways twisted like vines between whitewashed buildings, and the scent of basil and grilled sardines lingered in the warm air. Mariana followed Sophia and Rue through a rusted iron gate into a modest courtyard shaded by lemon trees. A scruffy brown dog barked once, then quickly lost interest and wandered off to lie in the sun. Hola, Domingos. Rue called cheerfully as they stepped toward the door of a small house with blue tiles flaking off its front. From inside came a voice, rough like gravel, but tinged with music. You're early, and you've brought someone new. A man in his 60s appeared, wiping his hands on a towel. He was broad-shouldered, with a mop of gray curls and eyes that sparkled beneath heavy lids. He didn't smile, but something in his face softened when he looked at Mariana. I'm Domingos. I grow tomatoes and I talk too much, he said simply, turning and gesturing for them to follow. The house was cool and dim, filled with the scent of simmering broth and fresh herbs. Pots of thyme and oregano lined the windowsills, and every surface bore signs of life. Open books, a cracked teacup, a sleeping cat curled beside a radio. But it was the garden that stole Mariana's breath. Behind the house, an unruly paradise sprawled. Vines crept up every wall, tomatoes hung heavy on the stalks, and bursts of orange marigold spilled like fire across the beds. There were fig trees and a small grapevine, and a wooden bench, nearly swallowed by ivy. Domingos handed her a basket. Pick what looks good. Don't be shy. Mariana hesitated, then knelt beside a tomato plant. The fruit was warm to the touch, almost pulsing with life. She picked one, then another. Soon her hands were full. As they cooked, Domingos spoke with the rhythm of someone who had always known solitude. He told stories that danced between humor and melancholy, mentioning old neighbors, lost friends, a sister who had vanished one summer and never come back. There were pauses, but never silences. His voice filled the space without crowding it. Sophia and Rue moved around the small kitchen like they belonged there. Mariana stirred the pot when asked. She set the table with Rue. She laughed, almost against her will, when Domingos mimicked a tourist trying to order in Portuguese. Lunch was served beneath the lemon trees, with mismatched plates and chipped bowls of stew so thick it barely sloshed. The bread was crusty, the olives sharp, and the tomatoes sweet like sunlight. For a long while they just ate. The breeze carried the distant notes of a street musician's violin. Above, pigeons cooed from red-tiled roofs. After the meal, Domingos poured small glasses of gingembre.
For the soul, he said.
One sip. No more. Mariana held hers carefully. She had forgotten how it felt to linger, to taste, to sit without an edge inside her chest. You're not from the streets, are you? Domingos asked softly, more observation than question. Mariana met his gaze. I am now. He nodded slowly, as if accepting not just the words, but everything they carried. You'll find your place. If not here, then somewhere. But until then, my door is always open. It was not a promise, not a solution, but it was something sturdy, something real. As they left, Domingos handed her a jar of olives and a small tomato plant in a cracked pot. For your window, when you find one. Mariana carried it carefully, as if it were something fragile and sacred. The tram ride back was quiet. Rue tapped a rhythm against the window with his fingers. Sophia dozed lightly, her head leaning against the seat. Mariana looked at the pot in her lap, then out at the city rolling by. For the first time, Lisbon didn't feel like a place she was lost in. It felt like a place that might remember her name. Days in Lisbon began to stitch themselves into patterns. Morning walks down Calcutta streets, shared meals in quiet corners, Rue's soft humming as he scribbled in his notebook, and Sophia's sharp laughter echoing in the tiled kitchen. It was a rhythm not unlike music, irregular but recognizable. Mariana had begun to sleep through the night. Not always, and not without interruption, but enough to dream again. And it was in one of those early dreams, gray and thick like ocean mist, that she first heard the name, Helena. She mentioned it over breakfast one day, unthinking, stirring butter into her toast. I dreamed about a woman named Helena. Sophia froze with her cup halfway to her lips. Rui set his pen down slowly. What did she look like? Sophia asked almost too casually. Mariana thought for a moment. Blonde hair. Or gray, maybe. Pulled back. She was sitting by a window with a red curtain. I remember her fingers, long and veined. She was waiting. Sophia's jaw clenched slightly. She's real. Mariana blinked. What? Helena lives in Graca, Rui explained quietly. Not far from here. She's a friend of Domingo's. Well, not a friend exactly. Something more difficult. She waits, Sophia murmured, almost to herself. Later that afternoon, Rui and Mariana walked together through the winding lanes of Graca, the steepest hills in the city, making conversation breathless. At last they stood before a pale yellow house with a small iron gate. A red curtain fluttered in the upper window. Rui knocked once. Then again. A woman opened the door, her face marked by time, but dignified. Her hair was coiled in a loose chignon, silver catching the sun. She wore a blue cardigan despite the heat. Mariana, she said softly, as if greeting someone returning from a long journey. Come in. The flat was quiet and dim, filled with books stacked on every surface. Plants curled toward the light from the windows. Photographs lined the mantel, black and white portraits, sepia seaside shots, faded faces frozen in time. Helena moved slowly, each gesture deliberate. She offered tea in thin porcelain cups that rattled slightly in their saucers. Rui sat silently across the room, watching. You saw me, she said at last. In your dream. Mariana nodded. You were waiting. I've been waiting for 50 years. There was no bitterness in her voice. Just fact, laid bare like weathered stone. For what? Mariana asked quietly. Helena looked toward the window. A man who said he'd return. He left just before the revolution. I waited through the war, through Salazar's fall, through the rebuilding. He never came back. Not truly. Rui cleared his throat. Domingos. Helena didn't answer. She rose and moved to a cupboard. From within it, she retrieved a small box wrapped in linen. She opened it to reveal letters, yellowed, some torn at the edges. Postmarked from Angola, Mozambique, even Paris. None newer than 30 years ago. He wrote until he couldn't. He loved me the way a storm loves a tree. Fiercely, briefly, then silence. Mariana touched one of the letters gently, her fingertip tracing the faded ink. You still keep them, she whispered. Helena smiled, not with joy, but with understanding. Some stories aren't meant to be finished. Just held. There was a long pause. The city murmured outside, trams passing and children laughing in distant courtyards. When they left, Helena pressed one of the letters into Mariana's hand. Not for reading, she said. Just to remember what believing feels like. As they descended the hill, Mariana looked back once. The red curtain swayed like a heartbeat. Rui said nothing for a long while, then finally asked, Do you think she's mad? No, Mariana answered. I think she's a lighthouse. Still burning, even when the ship never comes. That night, she sat by the window with the letter beside her. She did not open it, but she slept with it under her pillow, and for the first time, her dreams were filled with light. The August heat began to press down heavier on Lisbon, turning the air thick and still. The city moved slower, like an old man waking reluctantly. The tiles on the pavement burned underfoot, and the Tagus shimmered like molten metal in the afternoon sun. But something else was shifting, something quieter, beneath the surface. Mariana had started walking alone. Not to escape Rui or Sophia, but to feel the city with her own steps, to let her memories stretch in unfamiliar streets. One morning, she wandered to Alfama, drawn by the scent of grilled sardines and the low hum of fado music floating out of shadowed alleyways. There, by chance or fate, she met an old man named Estevao, sweeping the stone steps near a crumbling archway. His hands were marked by age and hard work, his eyes pale and alert. You have the look of someone who has seen too many ghosts, he said in Portuguese. Mariana smiled faintly and replied in the same tongue. Perhaps I have. They spoke for a while. He told her he had lived in Alfama all his life, through earthquakes and revolutions, through the fall of empires and the rise of tourist cafes. He had buried friends and planted olive trees. He had seen the city crumble and grow again. Then, he leaned on his broom and asked, "Do you want to see what lies beneath?" He led her through a side alley, then down into a cool, narrow tunnel. It opened into a hidden chamber, once part of the old Roman ruins that the city had been built over. Cracked pillars stood like forgotten sentinels, and faint inscriptions marked the walls. "They built on top of this," Estevao said, his voice reverent. "The kings, the generals, the priests. All of them placed stone upon stone without understanding what was already here. And when the ground shook, it wasn't the new buildings that stood. It was these ruins." Mariana touched the stone. It was smooth and cold, and yet pulsing somehow with memory. "You think I'm part of this?" she whispered. Estevao turned to her. "I think you've been walking on your own ruins, hoping they'd stay buried. But memory is like water. It finds a way." She stayed in that chamber for a long time after he left, her hand resting on ancient stone. She thought of Helena's letter, still unopened, now resting in her journal. She thought of her father's voice on the phone that night in November. She thought of her own voice, silent when it should have shouted. That evening, she returned to Rue and Sophia's flat without speaking a word. She ate dinner quietly, washed her plate, then stepped into the bathroom and closed the door. And she wept, not the broken sobs of someone falling apart, but the slow, cleansing tears of someone beginning to put the pieces back together. She cried for her sister, for her silence, for the child who never got to be born, and for the version of herself she had buried so long ago beneath grief and guilt. The next morning, she placed the unopened letter from Helena on the kitchen table. "For you," she said to Sophia. "Not to read, just to know it exists." Sophia took it gently and nodded. "Are you leaving?" Rue asked. "No," Mariana said. "But I think I'm ready to look underneath now." And that day, for the first time, she began writing.
Not in her phone.
Not in quick texts or panicked emails, but by hand, in a real notebook, with ink that stained her fingers. She wrote about Joanna, about her childhood, about the house on Rua de Saudade, about the fear, and about the ruins she had never dared to touch until now. The morning sunlight filtered softly through the lace curtains, casting delicate patterns on the worn wooden floor of the flat. Mariana sat at the small kitchen table, the unopened letter from Helena lying before her like a silent invitation. The air was heavy with expectation, but also with an uncertain hope. Her fingers trembled as she reached for the envelope, breaking the seal slowly, carefully, as if it held a fragile truth. The handwriting inside was familiar yet distant, elegant and trembling with emotion. "Dear Mariana," it began, "I have waited a long time to write these words, but fear and silence have kept me bound. I owe you the truth, the story of what happened to Joanna, and why I vanished from your life." Mariana's breath caught as she read Helena's confession, a story tangled with secrets, pain, and unexpected courage. It spoke of choices made in desperation, of love twisted by fear, and of a family fractured by silence. As the letter unfolded, Mariana felt years of weight lift slightly. The mystery that had shadowed her for so long began to unravel, thread by delicate thread. Helena admitted her mistakes, but also her hope for forgiveness and healing. The letter ended with an invitation. Helena wanted to meet, to talk face to face, to finally bridge the chasm that had grown between them. Mariana folded the letter slowly, her mind racing with questions and emotions. Could she forgive? Could she open her heart again after so much hurt? Outside, the city of Lisbon carried on with its timeless rhythm. The sounds of trams clattering on cobblestones, the distant laughter from street cafes, and the gentle breeze coming from the Tagus mingled with Mariana's quiet resolve. She looked out of the window and whispered, "It's time." The narrow cobbled streets of Alfama were alive with the golden hues of late afternoon. The smell of roasting chestnuts mingled with the salty breeze from the Tagus River. Mariana stood near the old fountain, heart pounding as she waited. Helena appeared from the shadow of a tiled archway, her eyes searching until they met Mariana's. There was a hesitance in her step, but also a quiet strength. They approached each other slowly, the distance between years shrinking with every step. Words were heavy at first, but soon they began to flow, carrying stories of regret, forgiveness, and hope. Helena spoke of the fear that had driven her away, the mistakes she had made trying to protect Joanna, and the loneliness that followed. Mariana listened, her own pain mingling with understanding. As the sun dipped lower, the two women found a fragile peace. In the heart of Lisbon's oldest neighborhood, amidst history and whispered memories, they took the first steps toward healing. Mariana realized that the past, with all its shadows, did not have to define her future. And in that moment, the city around them seemed to hold its breath, waiting for a new chapter to begin.